සුළු ජාතීන්ට සිදු කරන වෙනස්කම්.
अवैध हत्या,
तजाद,
सामूहिक उड़ीवाकर,
बेअदालती,
जलवायु परिवर्तन,
भुखमरी,
लिंगना आधार पर भेदभाव,
වෛරී
समानता,
शिनाय,
पार्श्वीकरण,
जंग,
सुरक्षित स्थानों की कमी,
भ्रष्टाचार,
जातीना आधार पर भेदभाव,
සම්පත් අසමානව බෙදීයම්.
अशिक्षा,
तशद्दुद,
नीतियुडे अभावम,
तबईज,
धार्मिक कट्टरता, उत्पीड़न,
ඉඩම් ආරවුල්.
तकरार,
Yes, hello. Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for joining us today in this iTAGe event, talking across generations on the state of preventing violent extremism in South Asia. The United Nations Alliance of Civilizations is very excited to organize its first iTAGe event in partnership with the UNESCO Mahatma Gandhi Institute for Peace and Sustainable Development and the UNESCO New Delhi Cluster Office. The event is organized within the framework of the second phase of Youth Waging Peace, which is an initiative of UNESCO, MGIEP, and UNAOC that takes the UNESCO MGIEP's youth-led guide on preventing violent extremism to the grassroots communities of South Asia. UNAOC and UNESCO MGIEP trained and empowered 35 South Asian youth leaders with the skills and tools to ideate and implement community-wide PVE through education activities and mobilize their communities towards sustainable peace. 12 brave Youth Waging Peace participants took it a step further and decided to develop a youth-led report on the state of preventing violent extremism in South Asia, which will include actionable recommendations on ways to influence policy and practices on PVE in the region. Concretely, it will give policymakers an accessible, youth-centered overview of violent extremism in South Asia, its definitions, how it manifests, what drives it, what regional stakeholders, especially the youth, are doing about it, and finally, areas for policy intervention to help build resilient and pro-social cultures that organically prevent violent extremism. The report, expected to be published in late 2021, will be widely shared as a PVE resource among key stakeholders. In order to collect the regional youth voices, the young authors of the report decided to collect recommendations, practices, and case studies via 3 data collection tools: a survey, focus group discussions, and finally, today's intergenerational dialogue. They managed to collect more than 1,000 survey responses and organize 3 in-depth focus group discussions with 43 young survey takers. 6 of those 43 are today's protagonists and were selected as conversation with 4 senior PV experts. One of the young people will also moderate one of the sessions today. We have divided today's event into 2 sessions, which we hope you will enjoy it to the fullest. But before we start the first dialogue, the 3 organizing UN entities would like to give you a warm welcome. Without no further ado, I would like to give the floor to our first partner, UNESCO Mahatma Gandhi Institute of Education for Peace and Sustainable Development, or MGIEP. Its director, Dr. Ananta Durayapa, was not able to join us today, but Mr. Abel Kane, Senior Project Officer, will speak for MGIEP. Abel, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Bram. Greetings, everybody, from New Delhi in India, where the monsoon rains have just started again for today. So it's nice and beautifully cool. Thank you to Bram for this wonderful introduction. I'm just going to, on behalf of our director, Professor Ananta Duraipa, I'd like to please read out his comments. It starts with acknowledging that the youth are fundamentally key to any discussion on the prevention of violent extremism. They can be vulnerable if they're not trained in social and emotional learning. And we know this because of the research from neurosciences say that individuals at the age of 16 to 24 are risk takers, they're impatient, and they're rebellious when they witness injustice. They want change, and this can either be harnessed for good or for violence. They want to be heard, and we must listen to them and not just hear them. We must refrain from youth washing. Our hope is that this iTAGe, or an independent talking across generations, among the many talks across generations that MGIEP has organized, will not only produce a wonderful report, but it'll catalyze youth to use this report to become agents for change, champions leading up to an International Day of Kindness that MGIEP is organizing. The Global Terrorism Index of 2020 showed that South Asia had the highest average impact from terrorism in 2019. Additionally, in that same year, Pakistan and the Philippines were in the top 10 countries most impacted by terrorism. And Bangladesh saw some terrible terrorist activity in 2019 with 6 attacks claimed by ISIS. The US Center for Disease Control and Prevention confirms that youth who have been exposed to violence are at a much higher risk of depression and deficiencies in empathy. These impairments can increase vulnerability for perpetuating violence and recruitment into extremist groups and organized violence. The trauma that this has on the health and the well-being of youth can last a lifetime, and maybe even several lifetimes. Exposure to this violence can alter biological development and even influence DNA. These conditions generate a self-perpetuating cycle of violence, but there are interventions that can interrupt and reverse these outcomes. While traumatic stress is not an automatic trigger for the involvement with violence and violent extremism, it does not appear in most instances of radicalization. It's a key contributor, but not the pathway to violence. Extensive interviews with 44 members of violent white supremacist groups by the University of Maryland reveal the following. 45% reported being the victim of childhood physical abuse. 21% reported being the victim of childhood sexual abuse. 57% reported experiencing mental problems as diagnosed by a medical practitioner either preceding or during their extremist involvement. And 72% reported problems with alcohol and illegal drugs. Today's iTAGe is the midway point of the survey tools and the focused group discussions that Bram was referencing. We're going to have a wonderful discussion between highly selected youth and senior speakers in order to have a frank dialogue. It's a no holds barred, no hierarchy dialogue. This is not youth washing, but a dialogue where the youth and the seniors have mutual respect for each other. They listen, they empathize, and they act with acts of kindness. We look forward to the report from our youth authors who are here today listening to this dialogue. We look forward to the report that will be coming out later this year. And just to conclude, I'd like to again sincerely thank UNAOC, our partners Bram, Julie, Carlos, UNESCO New Delhi office, particularly Maya, and of course, our speakers, our senior speakers, esteemed, well-renowned. We are looking forward to your wisdom, to your reality, to tell the youth. To our youth speakers, you were selected through an entirely rigorous process. You are now going to be part of a proud fellowship of Tagee speakers. We want you to be confident, honest, respectful, and to make sure that you get your thoughts, views, opinions, facts, statistics, data, solutions across to these senior speakers so that they can implement it. And one day you're going to be in that position, and MGIEP looks forward to be working with you throughout this entire process. Thank you very much to everybody. Really looking forward to this dialogue.
Thank you, Abel, for those very inspiring words. As the next speaker, I would like to present Mr. Eric Falt, who is the director of the UNESCO New Delhi Cluster Office. Unfortunately, he couldn't be with us in person, but we have a video message.
Recording stop. Recording in progress.
There seems to be an issue with the video, but we can come back later. So I will first give the floor to my programming coordinator of the United Nations Alliance of Civilizations, Mr. Alessandro Chirola. Alessandro, please go ahead.
Thank you, Bram. Good morning. Good morning, everybody from New York. Dear panelists, dear audience, first of all, I would like to thank you, all the speakers here with us today, and the UNESCO Mahatma Gandhi Institute for Peace and Development, and the UNESCO New Delhi Cluster Office as partner, together with the United Nations Alliance of Civilization in this initiative. South Asia is one of the most ethnically and religiously diverse regions in the world. In recent times, he has seen a worrying rise in religious and ethnic intolerance, with young people being pushed or pulled to the front lines of violent extremism. Unfortunately, youth are often depicted as victim or perpetrator and rarely as actor tackling violent extremism. However, regional and international efforts to prevent violent extremism and build peace can bear sustainable results until and unless young people are considered essential agents in our society. The current generation is acknowledged as the largest in history and has a critical role in shaping major social and political advancement, as well as being able to address the challenges related to global and local instability. Young people are the most able to mobilize their peers. Sadly, this interconnectivity has also been exploited by violent extremists, and is therefore necessary that we reclaim this space by amplifying the voices of young peace builders. Over the years and through its programming activities, UNAOC has encouraged youth leadership with the aim to help future generations become active global citizens, resilient to violent extremism, and able to counter radicalization through critical thinking and enhance social-emotional competencies. I'm very pleased to see that a group of South Asian youth took the lead in collecting the in drafting an important report that will showcase the sentiment of young people of the region, what they want, what they feel, do, and think. I would like to congratulate them for their efforts in this wonderful initiative. It is impressive that they were able to collect until now more than 1,000 surveys from young peace builders across the region, with 6 of them joining us today as panelists. More than 1,000 young voices with unique ideas and approaches on what is violent extremism, its drivers, its manifestation, and its solution. Being just the tip of the iceberg, the 1,000 voices are a symbolic milestone and a sign of how many young people out there could be potential contributors to PVE policies and plans of the countries of the region. And I would like to call on policymakers in the region and beyond to take a closer look at this report once ready later this year. Without taking into account the insights of youth on PVE policy might fall short. In this context, there is a youth-led report on the state of PVE in South Asia that contains a collection of youth-centered actionable recommendations for policymakers, aims to provide a solution to this gap. It is also important to note that this report will not only be unique from its youth perspective, but also from a regional perspective, since it takes into consideration that PVE can only work if contextualized in light of the fact that drivers of violent extremism can vary across individuals, community, and region. Besides the survey and the focus group discussions, today's event will also have a unique added value by tackling the urgent need for intergenerational dialogue. The advantage of bringing the experience, wisdom, and skills of different people from different generations is priceless. And for this, I would really like to thank the senior expert joining us today for their commitment and openness in engaging with these amazing young people. Let me conclude my remark, and I look forward to a fruitful discussion and to reading the report later in the year. Thank you very much. Then over to you, Bram.
Thank you, Alessandro. Thank you very much. I got the news that we can play the video of Mr. Eric Falt, so Director and Representative of UNESCO New Delhi Cluster Office.
Honorable guests, esteemed speakers, colleagues, and members of the audience, good evening. UNESCO New Delhi is delighted to be taking part today in this intergenerational discussion on the prevention of violent extremism in South Asia. I wish, first of all, to send my best regards and appreciation to our partner organizations, the UN Alliance of Civilizations and UNESCO MGIEP, as well, of course, as the numerous young representatives who have helped put this event together. This follows great efforts made by young people all over South Asia during the past few months. Young peace builders, supported by the 3 UN partner agencies, have collected experiences and voices of over 1,000 young people in the region on the and these efforts and the dialogue that will follow today are truly taking place at a very pertinent point in time. Around the world, the COVID-19 pandemic has exacerbated existing divides and inequalities and allowed different forms of discrimination, hate, and extremism to fester in our societies. Growing levels of polarization and hate speech risk undermining the trust and cohesion that hold our societies together and present all of us with an urgent challenge to address the root causes of these challenges. In this context, UNESCO celebrates the resilience and creativity of young people in South Asia who have, over the past year, shared their experiences related to violent extremism and who are making efforts to promote peaceful coexistence in their communities. Indeed, the course ahead must be charted together through the whole of society and with a participatory approach that reflects the needs and experiences of young people. Violent extremism is a fundamental social problem which calls for social solutions where everyone is a stakeholder. Achieving this requires mutual understanding and dialogue between generations. That's why intergenerational discussions like the one today are important. They are meant to bring together the experiences, wisdom, and skills of different people and generations. These dialogues are essential in making sure that strategies, policies, and plans in all countries of the region take into account the experiences and recommendations made by youth and benefit current and future generations alike. This is, again, I must stress, particularly relevant in the current context as countries consider policy options for a post-COVID world and the decade of action to achieve the Sustainable Development Goals by 2030. This context provides youth an opportunity to bring forth their innovative ideas and entrepreneurial spirit and to see how they can reimagine and re-engineer a world that is more peaceful and just and where no one is left behind. In South Asia, with the largest youth labor force in the world and with almost half of its population below the age of 24, young people truly hold the key to a more resilient and sustainable future. Therefore, I hope this dialogue between youth and their seniors today will serve as an insightful and open discussion about the issues at hand and provide an opportunity to join hands in the common pursuit of promoting social cohesion. Listening to and respecting one another can achieve the kind of collective intelligence that will help us to build more peaceful societies. Across generations, we all, the future will turn out better for everyone. Thank you, and I wish you a stimulating and fruitful dialogue.
Thank you. Many inspiring words from the 3 organizing organizations, but now we will proceed to the part of our event for which you're all here, which are the intergenerational dialogues. I know you must all be very excited. The first session will be moderated by Ms. Maya Litinen. She's a PVE and hate speech analyst at UNESCO New Delhi, and Mr. Parviz Mosamim, who is the coordinator at Students for Liberty organizations. I hope you enjoy. Parviz, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Bram, for the inputs and being very supportive during the PVE report. So a very good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to everyone who is joining us through Zoom, and also the people who are watching us through social media, especially Facebook of UNAOC. I'm so delighted and I'm so excited to be one of the moderators of today's dialogue of iTAGe, talking across generations on the state of PVE in South Asia. So let me introduce myself a little and just we go ahead with the dialogue because I know that everyone is waiting to have a fruitful discussion. So this is Parvez Musammem. I'm a journalist, a local coordinator at the Students for Liberty organization, which we focus on peace, education, and liberty in South Asia. Also, I am one of the youth authors on the State of PVE in South Asia. So we all know that the topic that today we are going to discuss is not just significant in South Asia, but actually in the global context. So before that, we start the dialogue. So I hand over the speech to my great friend, Maya. Maya, the floor is yours. Please have your introduction or your speech. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Parvez. Thank you, Bram. So my name is Maya Lutinen. I am from the UNESCO New Delhi Cluster Office working on topics related to prevention of violent extremism and hate speech, and will be co-moderating today with Parvez. A pleasure to be here. Thanks everyone for joining. Just in the beginning, I'd like to point that if any members of the audience, if you have any questions, please feel free to write them in the Q&A box and we'll pick them up as we go. And over to you, Parvez, to introduce our first speaker.
Thank you so much, Maya. So I'm so excited, because I'm seeing our 3 youth speakers here and also our 2 senior experts. So I hope that we have a great discussion. So as we see the South Asian countries nowadays, so one of the countries that the violent extremist cases is increasing is in Afghanistan, and we are from Afghanistan. So let me introduce Mujda, and then I asked the first question from Mujda. So Mujda is a civil activist. She holds a Bachelor of Law and Political Science from Herat University in Afghanistan, and she has been engaged in civil activities and advocacy in Afghanistan, as well as now she's doing her master's degree in Turkey. But as we know, Mujda now is in Afghanistan. So Mujda, welcome to the program. We are very happy to have you. So the first question is from you. How does the current situation in Afghanistan impact young people, and what is the role of youth in the conflict? So if you got the question, so please have your time for 2 or 3 minutes, and we'll listen to you.
Okay. Thank you, and I'm very happy and excited that I'm a member of a panelist of this dialogue. As it is clear for everybody, the current situation of Afghanistan is very disaster. We have some civil war, ethnic wars, and also all the kind of violent extremism in high ranking in my country. And I know the most generation, especially the youth generation, is very affected by these situations. And most of our generations, they immigrated to the country because there is no safety for them and there is no hope. They are all hopeless, but youth trying to fix these situations, and they always effort to change this situation, especially women. And another issues that one talks, it is about the gender discriminations in high ranking. Because of these issues, the most sections of our society that is include the women, they are to prevent the kind of violent extremism. So I want that how we can, how especially our generation, especially the youth people, in this situation that the civil war is now in Afghanistan, Afghanistan, how they can change the situations, and how the governor supports the youth revolts. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mojda, for the inputs. So we all know that the current situation in Afghanistan is not good. The conflict is going on in most of the cities in Afghanistan, and unfortunately, as Mojda said, most of the young generation in Afghanistan, they are hopeless. They are about to leave the country. They think that their future is not in this country, but we do hope that we see a peaceful Afghanistan in the future, and we have a peace deal with the people that they are fighting. So I hand over the speech to Maya.
Thank you, Parvis. And I would like to next introduce and ask the question from one of our senior experts. So we have with us Dr. Meenakshi Gopinath, who has founded the Women in Security, Conflict Management and Peace organization, which promotes the leadership of women in South Asia in areas of peace and security. Thank you so much for being here. So Dr. Gopinath is a scholar working on the topics of peace and security. And therefore, I would like to ask you a conceptual question, Dr. Gopinath. Who should define what is violent extremism, and what are the impacts of defining violent extremism? Thank you.
Thank you, Maya. First of all, deep gratitude to MGIEP, UNESCO, and also the Alliance on Civilizations for this amazing opportunity to interact with young people such as you and to hear your wisdom on this. Now, this whole business of definitions has been very fraught. As you know, that there has been research on this, both as you said in Maryland, in the United Kingdom, and across the globe, but there has been no definitive definition of what constitutes terrorism. And there is a tendency to conflate violent extremism with terrorism, which is something we should be doing. It's a much more nuanced matrix. And you know that because you know about hate speech and you've been working against this whole process of dehumanizing so-called the other. So the question of definitions is a fraught one. All I would like to say is that we need to address and confront and accept that in the land of the Buddha and Gandhi, there is a deep-seated ambivalence to violence. And this is not just limited to young people, it is across. And I think in some ways, our generation has failed the youth of South Asia. So it's important for us to move away from framing this whole business as though the youth are at risk or the youth are the problem. Basically, if we are going to have a counter narrative, then that narrative is going to come from the young people. Let's not forget that even while 1 out of 4 people, young people, are affected by conflict, the number, the percentage and the proportion of young people who ascribe to violent extremism is a small fraction of their total population. Now, this is sometimes missed out in the larger meta-narratives which define policy panic, where there is a tendency to look at the youth as some kind of a liability that needs to be somehow pulled out of this whole quagmire that is awaiting to catch hold of them. I think it's important for us to shift the frames of reference. And you know, there's that famous book by George Lakoff that said, "Don't think elephant." In other words, don't accept the frames of reference that are handed to you. Reinvent the vocabulary. And I think that is what we are looking for from this dialogue, which young people like you will redefine. For example, when after 9/11, when the Bush administration framed this whole thing as the axis of evil, okay, you already have created exclusions. So what are you doing You know that Einstein has said that you cannot find a solution from the same consciousness that created the problem. So how is that shift in consciousness going to happen? That would be the question that I would ask young people, because they are supremely positioned to offer this alternative vocabulary. I'll stop there and maybe proceed. Thank you.
Thank you so much. That's fascinating. And I think we can see that we have a big force of youth peace builders behind us working across the region on these topics for sure. And I agree with you about reinventing the vocabulary and seeing what these issues are in South Asia. I think that's the point of this discussion. I'm sure the young people have lots of questions that they would like to present related to these issues as well. And next. Parviz, thank you.
Thank you so much, Maya. And also thank you so much, Professor Kopinat, for your great information. So we have another youth speaker. So he's Mr. Hasibul Hassan from Bangladesh. Hasibul is one of our youth speakers who has worked on research projects with large organizations in Bangladesh, including Plan International and the South Asian Network on Economic Modeling. So Hasibul, the question that I want to ask you is that in the context of Bangladesh, how do you think volunteers play a role in preventing violent extremism? And what structural changes would amplify the efforts of these volunteer groups? Please have your time for 3 minutes.
Thank you, Parvez. And I think as a Bangladeshi, you know, all over the world, Bangladesh is a peaceful country and we are known all over the world as a peaceful nation. But in recent years, we face a huge concern of some increased terrorist activities and political violence and violent extremism, which is also a cause of concern for young generation who's born later 20th century. So I think you asked me about the volunteerism. Most of the young people are doing their activity through the use of proper technology, but there is a concern that misuse of technology and abuse of technology, some like spiritual leaders or some like terrorist group use this technology abusively. They're going to misleading some political narratives and they misguide our youth, especially most of the university kids or high college school going kids. And I think if we focus on volunteerism, our policymakers or our government also focus on the useful and fruitfulness of handle this kind of misuse or misguiding. You can't handle the volunteerism of youth don't give you the fruitful or fruition their activities. And if you talk about the volunteerism, I think we should make a inclusive situation. You know, in our country, most of the people are poor and their literacy rate is so little, though they don't know even about for example, if I go in my rural areas and told about them that you should do that to prevent the extreme violence, they should think what are you talking about, we know, don't they? Because you know our ancestors are peaceful, they don't even know about the existing of this kind of things. But in an international perspective, there is a huge concern about the recent activity in our Bangladesh, especially the terrorist activity. So I think we should make an inclusive and resilient policy to make youth and make a huge connectivity with higher officials and make them a platform to ensure that their volunteerism bring the current and most fruitful message to the community, and especially the marginalized community where we can focus. So that's all about, I think.
Thank you so much, Hasibul. We all know that for preventing violent extremism, we need a lot of stakeholders to engage and just to work. And so one part can be like volunteers, especially the young generation, that they know that, for example, violent extremism in South Asia is increasing and they should fight against that one. So I hope that the policymakers also take care of for example, volunteer groups that they are working in their regions, and we have like productive kind of activities. So Maya, it's your turn.
Thank you very much, Parvis. Next, I would like to introduce our second expert, our senior expert, Mr. Muraritharan from the Ministry of Education in Sri Lanka. He is currently directing the Department for Peace, Education and Reconciliation. Thank you so much for being here with us today. Given his extensive experience and background in the field of education, including on teacher education, I would like to ask you, sir, first, what should a peace curriculum in a classroom look like? And what are some of the best practices and challenges in building peace through the education sector? Thank you.
Thank you for the opportunity. In Sri Lanka, curriculum was totally focused on academic subjects, but we have experienced movements in 72 movement in southern part of Sri Lanka. Then after the ethnic riots in 77 and 83, radical movement in the northern province. So these experiences made policymakers to introduce social integration and value education into the school culture or school curriculum. So in 92, in 90, the extensive research was conducted about the youth unrest. From that respect, 97 education reforms considered about this peace education and social integration concepts, and they try to introduce as a cross-cutting matter, no special subject introduced, but religious subject first focus for this peaceful living. But it won't work well. It didn't work well. But in 2008, we formulated a policy how to address this issue and how the peace education could be introduced. So again, it has to be a cross-cutting solution. So we introduced through extracurricular activities, co-curricular activities, and selected subjects and languages. You know, Sri Lanka as a Tamil-speaking and Sinhala-speaking population. So that first we thought that each other should know about their language. In the northern part and eastern part, people speaks Tamil, and other 7 provinces predominantly Sinhala-speaking population. So in order to get a mutual understanding, the language is vital. So we thought of starting English as a compulsory subject or English medium education, but finding difficult to get a qualified teacher. That's still in a slow process. In other words, we thought of teaching Tamil to Sinhala students and teaching Sinhala to Tamil students and teaching vice versa. So that also we made it compulsory for grade 6 to 7. That also ongoing process. And civic education, we found a suitable subject to introduce these kind of concepts. So through curriculums, extracurriculum, co-curricular activities and school, we try to make schools bilingual schools that provide Sinhala medium education as well as Tamil medium education. But we can't establish such schools in most of the restricted with single language speaking population. So we have out of 10,000 schools, we have able to establish 434 bilingual schools. So there are barriers, some are, but the policy we formulated in 2008, this also during the time of the war, you know, ethnic war experienced by Sri Lanka for over 30 years from 83 to 2009. So after 2009, the war is over. So we thought of in line, we have to, that policy has to be revised. So now that process is ongoing. But again, in 2019, we experienced a different problem. That is, we all heard about Easter attack. 3 churches in Sri Lanka was subjected to attack by Muslim youth. So these things, time to time, that the pattern of the conflict is changing. So according to that, we need to change the curriculum. Anyhow, Sri Lanka is also experiencing that PVE. So again, that peace education is important for us. But however, that the school education is more focused on the exam-oriented task. So then these kind of co-curricular or the peace education activities we introduced in the school system was not recognized properly, and the motivation to implement that activities are very low.
Thank you so much, sir. It's really interesting to hear about your experiences over these years and starting this kind of exciting programs on peace education. And thank you for your honesty and, frank assessment of how things have been. And it seems like there is some great progress that has been made on introducing different kinds of schools with different kinds of languages, but the work ahead is one that we can all contribute to, hopefully, through our youth here as well. I'm sure they have some questions as well related to what you said. Thank you. And Parviz?
Thank you so much, Maya. So before that, I asked the next question. So of course, the questions are also welcome. So our audience, you can feel free to write your questions in QA box, and we will pick your questions and we'll ask from our senior experts as well as our youth speakers, as well as if our youth speakers, they have questions from our senior experts, feel free to write and we'll ask, and also if our senior experts, they have questions from the youth speakers also. We have our third Khalid. So Sadia Khalid has a PhD in education and is involved in research and activism related to climate change. So given her experience in running 2 initiatives for youth empowerment and climate change. Sadia, welcome. And the question that I want to ask is, how do you think that violent extremism and education relate to each other in the context of preventing violent extremism? How does climate change impact drivers of violent extremism? Please have your time for 3 minutes. Please unmute yourself. Sadia, you're muted. Still, we cannot hear you. Yeah.
My mic was mute. Okay, good evening, everyone. And my point of view regarding this question is that what point of view we have regarding the violent extremism and the conflict in our society and how it relates to the climate change and because right now we are also in a climate emergency and we are also in a peace emergency too. Because we are in the denial mode. All our stakeholders, all the institutions, whether they are at the government or the private level or civil society or the youth leaders, they are basically in the denial mode, and they thought we have a lot of time, and we are not in the peace or climate related emergency, and we have a lot of time to solve it, and that's why they are not serious about it. And regarding the government, and as far as I have studied or I know that most of the countries even do not have the laws and the policies regarding these 2 issues, and that is why all the violent extremism is coming from the people or from the public because they know that if they are committing any kind of a violent act, or they are harming the environment, or their activities are negatively harming the environment, the law will do nothing, and they will ask freely, and they can roam freely, and no one will be going to do so. First of all, for me, it is very, very important to highlight these issues. And first of all, we have to come out from the denial mode, and we have to do something very, very seriously. And then all the government and private institutions, civil institutions, and the civil society all need to come on one platform, that now we are serious for these issues. And the third thing is that being an educationist, and we all know that education is the powerful and the greatest tool for tackling any issue, or for tackling any problem. So now we need peace curriculum. We need climate education curriculum in our schools, colleges, and university. And for for designing and preparing the curriculum, we need two things. We need the content on the theoretical level, and then the practical level. As the previous question was about the peace curriculum. So as far as I know, and I'm doing things for developing the content or the curriculum. So it is very important that we have to add the theoretical point of view, and in the theoretical curriculum, we need to address the theories, we need to address the reasons, we need to address the laws, and we need to address that why it matters and why our society need it at an immediate level. And then the next point is at the practical level, because if we do not practice it on the practical level, then the theories all goes vain, as it is going from last many years. Even our education system is all of us telling that we need to take care of our environment. We are responsible, and we are the first and last generation to deal with these issues. And if we do not take care of our environment or our peaceful society, so we will be going nowhere. But still, we are not serious. So on practical ground, we need to educate our younger generation about it, because younger generation is passionate, they are serious, and they can do many things that we could not think right now. So this is my point of view about this question.
Thank you so much, Sadia, for wonderful input. So I do agree that we should educate young generation regarding the climate change education, and also it's a need, not just in South Asia, in the global context. So Maya, do you think that we should pick some questions from maybe you, the speakers, to senior experts, or vice versa, or not, just we go to the questions from our audience? What do you think?
I think we could first allow some of our youth speakers to present some questions to the seniors based on the answers that they have given so far and the points that they've raised. So perhaps Hasibul, would you have some questions, please?
Yeah, sure, definitely. And as there are government on PVE, I want to ask, is whole of government approach enough to fight against PVE, or we should focus on some alternative approaches, like engage non-state actors in this activity to make it more inclusive? So that's my question.
Answer that?
Yeah, can you mute your voice, please?
May I answer that question, Hasibul?
Yes, of course, Professor.
Okay. Thank you so much, Hasibul. You raised a very important issue, and I think it was Maria Montessori who had said that, you know, managing conflict is the work of government, but establishing a lasting peace is really the work of education. And there is this tendency somehow to demonize what you call non-state actors who stay outside the pale of the order, the law and order framework of governments. Let's not forget that very often when we spoke about framing, how do we frame this whole issue? What do we call terrorism? It's a really wide open and very, very complex area. So we cannot use very glib definitions. But we do know, Hasibul, that of late, there has been a lot of Islamophobia associated with the way in which this issue is being framed, which is very unfortunate. For us in South Asia, especially, because we are a multicultural, plural society, we need to establish, understand our differences, and build on our commonalities in our search for common ground. And so when we talk about bringing misguided youth into the mainstream, we have to be very clear about what is this so-called mainstream we are talking about. It's a muddy mainstream, and let's not forget that acts of terrorism are not just confined to non-state actors. States are capable of extreme forms of violence. We know the crushing of dissent in our part of the world. We know the attack on Dalits. We know the sort of public lynchings that happen. And in many of this, the state is complicit. We have to recognize it, and we have to call out the violence of state structures as well. Again, and with due apologies to anyone here who might feel otherwise, somehow there is also this perpetuation of a discourse which sees violent extremism, terrorism somehow existing in the global south, right? And that the global north is really this benign overseer of democratic values. We know this is not true. We know about what passes as humanitarian intervention in many parts of the world, in disaster. And I think it's important for us to be aware of the facts, even as we speak of values and of peace and so on. The other, and I please correct me, stop me if I'm going on for too long. The conventional notion of peace as the lady in white, wholly passive and passively holy, is now being debunked, because we don't want the peace of the great. We want peace with justice. So it's important to recognize that peace is what happens, as Johan Galtung said, when creative conflict transformation happens non-violently. Conflict is a part of life. Not all conflict is bad. Because if we didn't have conflict, say, between your generation calling us out and asking us to explain why we were complicit in these patterns of violence and reinforcing them through states, through our education system. And education has not always been benign. We know from experiences in Rwanda, Sri Lanka, which denied the Tamils access to their mother tongue. We know of so many cases, and yet we also know of other instances like the Education for Mutual Understanding in Ireland that brought together so-called warring communities together. We know about Neve Shalom in Jaffa, where Palestinian and Jewish students come together to discuss their differences. So we have to recognize our differences. We have to celebrate our differences while we search for common ground. So I think your question is a very, very pertinent one, and thank you for raising it. One other thing, that when we are talking about education for peace and sustainable development, while we need to comfort the afflicted, we also need a vocabulary that afflicts the comfortable, especially when they're comfortably wrong. And I think that it's not just building curricula on peace as if everything is wonderful. We patch up our differences. Kumar Rupasinghe of Sri Lanka has written beautifully on what is active coexistence. It's not just the coexistence of, recognizing our boundaries and borders, keeping outside, away from each other, and somehow talking about coexistence. It's how we co-mingle, how we co-create a better world, and how it is an inclusive world, even as it doesn't like to homogenize. This is the real challenge of peace building. Thank you so much for that question, and you've given us more answers than we have for you. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Professor Koppennath, for your great, it was like a lecture. I really enjoyed that one. Also, Hasibul, thank you so much for your great question. I think we will have a lot of questions from the audience and also from the UD speaker. So I give the floor to another UD speaker if he or she has any question. Sadia or Mujda, if you have any.
May I ask?
Sure, sure.
I have a question about one of the most issues that all Afghan women from this issue, and is this about their culture that have very unity, and this is the cause of the gender discriminations and also the low level of participation of women in different affairs such as political, economical, and etc. Although the current system of Afghanistan and law prohibit any kind of discriminations and give women more chance to participate, but still the participations of women is fragile. In your opinion, how and which ways this culture will be eradicated, and how people's attitudes towards women during this situation that we are involved in a war, how we can change it immediately? Thank you.
Thank you, Mujda. However, I think we didn't hear you very well. So I think this question can fit with the background of Professor Gopinath. If you want to answer this one about gender discrimination, gender education.
It's a very difficult question, but thank you very much for it, Mojde. You know, in Afghanistan, you have what is known as a National Action Plan, and which is actually to give teeth to the Resolution 1325 of the UN on women, peace, and security. You also have, on paper, a 27% representation of women. So what does it say? That it's not what is legal that is good, but justice and legality, there is a gap. Because, for example, the absence of women at the talks, right, at the jirgas, what has happened? Why is it that Afghan women who've shown so much resilience, I mean, we know about RAWA and other organizations, why is it that women who have shown so much resilience have been kept out of the peace talks? Why is it that they have to struggle every moment? Because patriarchy exists in many, many ways and has many faces, which is why this new resolution, 2535 on youth, peace and security, YPS, suggests that the YPS agenda must work hand in hand with the WPS agenda. Because what are the two things that we need to counter in our societies? Patriarchy and gerontocracy, where the elders sit on judgment, people like me, and don't give the youth spaces for us. Spaces of dissent that are closing. Look at democratic articulations that are being snuffed out by populist governments. They are using instruments of the state, draconian laws, to snuffle dissent. If you don't have spaces to articulate dissent, you are going to have violence of some kind or the other, because voices need to be heard, and youth such as you need to give voice to the voiceless. And therefore, the women's peace and security agenda and the youth peace and security agenda are wedded together. They are intertwined. They have to work together. And in Afghanistan, the women are remarkable. You know, even in the last 10 years, look at the kind of enterprises they've opened. Look at the kind of creative mechanisms they've used to fight patriarchy. In spite of that, they have everyday resistances and daily mutinies in small places, in their homes, in their communities, in their schools, and so on. And you know that huge big outrage that happened when the teacher of Islamiyat was murdered in the public square. There was such a, on Farkhunda, there was a huge, swelling up of public sentiment. So I think people like you have the courage. Women like you have the courage. The youth, peace and security agenda is also for young women. And therefore you have to marry the two. And really hats off to the women of Afghanistan. And I know that in the hands of people like you. Your future is safe. It's difficult. It's very difficult because now what you're going to experience is going to be a trying time for you to find these creative spaces. How do you do that is another discussion altogether, but they do exist. Thank you very much for that question. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Professor Coconut. So since I am from Afghanistan and I did my master's degree, my thesis actually on the representation of women in the government agencies. So from 2001 till now, however, women in Afghanistan, they faced a lot of challenges, but we had progress as well. So we have their representation now in the government. There were women that they advocated for their rights and they stood for their rights. I think that as I can add something for Mujda is this, that you as Afghan woman, you should stand for your rights, that the word here for your voices, that you are fighting for your rights as well. So I don't want to speak too much in this case because we have a lot of questions. I hand over to Maya because she collected some questions from the audience. Maya.
Thank you very much. And thank you everyone in the audience for being so active. We have one question for Mr. Murali Saran. Alita Lake, he's asking, how can young people support building solid peace education frameworks to address the ideas of social cohesion, conflict resolution, PVE? So he's talking a little bit about how there's been a lot of interesting progressive initiatives. Some of them, unfortunately, have not quite taken root. And what's the role that youth can take in this? Thank you.
If I got that question, that how young people can support for this social cohesion, the PVE, that this concept is for young people. The young people, those who are in schools, now they have to thoroughly understand how their future world should be, how it could be molded according to their need. So such education should be provided. Therefore, radical education reform is needed nowadays to cater for these issues. So the young people, a country like Sri Lanka and India, mostly the education produce a competitive situation, and the rote learning given priority in the school system. So they are very rigid to learn about other issues, other cultural, other religious background, and how can mingle with them and all. In Sri Lankan situation, most of the things, these ethnic groups are compartmentalized. Very, very few occasions allow them to meet together because of the geographical reason, and schools also separated according to the ethnic. So, Sinhala schools, Tamil schools, Muslim schools. So the senior citizens of the country also like to make that divisions and to continue with same kind of schooling and continue with same kind of exam-oriented education system. In order to enter the world of work, they think about the knowledge, not think about the skills. So the young people, they should think about the future and think about how the parents, the forefathers behave, what they did the mistakes, and how that impact on the younger citizens' future. So they have to think properly. In Sri Lanka, we had some sort of such thinking, but unfortunately, that was distorted by some extremist group in 2019. That bypassing all seniors' thoughts, try to get together through the Facebook and other social media. The tendency was there in 2018 to 2017, but unfortunately, that trend was broken by some these extremist activities. So time to time, we have to monitor the youth, how their thinking pattern is in line with the contemporary world and their future of the world. So young people are the most vital in this regard to understand themselves in order to make better world tomorrow.
Thank you very much. Very inspiring. And I think that's true about the youth-led learning and how, youth can promote the 21st century skills and the type of skills and cognitive skills that they think that the future needs. I think that's a good point that you made. I think now we would...
Okay.
Yes, Parvis.
I'm sorry. I think Professor Gopinath may have questions from the youth speakers. If it is like this, it will be wonderful.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I mean, this is a question to all, Sadia, Moshde, and Hasibul. We've always been relying on what we call the hardware of peace building, in other words, curriculum, what is taught in the school, how do you get the skills, the tools. And where you people are so richly endowed is about the software of peace building, the emotional, the connect, we are all interconnected. This whole idea of interconnectedness about what is called emotional learning. So what, according to you, would be some of the important predispositions that you feel should be foregrounded and highlighted? For example, I would say empathy. I would say stepping into the shoes of the other, thinking from both sides of your brain, not just the logical, but also what is known as emotional. What would you think is for example, what you would call global intelligence? What does global intelligence require us to learn from you? Because you're all, so connected globally. Globalization has done that. You're in the virtual world a great deal. You're influenced both by the negative aspects of it, but also the positive connections that you make. So what do you think are some of the predispositions that outside of so-called formal curricula or government policy that you would like to bring to this space of youth building peace? I'm taking notes so that I can learn from you. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I think we don't have too much time. Sadia, just go ahead, please speak very briefly.
Okay, ma'am has raised a very, very important concern or a question, and I guess we all must think about it. And as I have mentioned earlier, that early years of education are very, very important for transforming the behaviors and attitude of a child. So I guess we should come with a model of modeling and actions. Matlab, if the elders' actions are positive, and if the elders' actions are teaching them a good ethics and the good morality, because peace and the violent extremism can be stopped with the good modeling or the good parenting, good modeling of the elders, and if the elders are doing the things. So in the early ages, we must give them the good example that how important caring is. One word we always used to teach in a poem, or that caring is caring is sharing. Yeah, sharing is caring. So it is an important thing. If you share things, if you do not need one thing, and if you share with someone, it can bring the smile on someone. If you are kind to animals, you are kind to the people who are weak or who do not have one thing, so it will bring the smile on them. So I guess the lessons of kindness, empathy, a good deed, and the and how you take care of the elders, how you take care of the society, how you take care of the things around you. So it can really help. And one more important thing, that what our parents are, what do they always like teach us the rigidity and the hatred towards the other community. And I guess case if we start celebrating the different festivals of the different religion, of the different races, of the different people belonging from different ethnic groups, so it can bring together. If we are celebrating picnic in a public ground, and all the people are with us, it could eliminate the hatred. It could eliminate the misconception between us, that maybe these are different, maybe they hate us. No one hate us. If we just spread the messages of the humanity, love and care, so it will really change the society. I know it is difficult, but we can start from ourselves. If I can start with my kids, my siblings, or nephew and nieces. We should start from ourselves. So these are the my life, and I changed my lifestyle in looking towards other people who are not like us in dresses, in language, in religion, but I just seeing them with the eye of love, care, and kindness.
Thank you so much, Sadia. Thank you so much. So Hasibul, if you just answer very briefly, 1 minute, kind of, it will be great.
Yeah, we as ma'am says, we are connected across the global world because we are living in a technology era, and it is so easy to get a message from others and share our thoughts, share our culture, share our diverse thoughtful activity with others, with other ethnic people. So I think there's a very strong way we can should make connectivity to reach the marginalized people and reach the ethnic people, to give the message to how should care each other, or how should we show some affection, how should show some love to the poor. For example, I want to say my organization during the pandemic hardships, we organized some charitable activities, and we also provide study materials to children to learning them. Most of the time during the pandemic, school are closed, so their educations are being hampered. So in this way, we youth, the stronger generations, the stronger, more, I think, than the others. So we can make sure the change. We can support each other. We can support our beloved ones, as well as our marginalized community who are not connected with the modern world with modern thoughts. So we can share our thoughts with them in an indigenous way, by going to them, by reach them, as well as we also share our affection, thought, compassion in virtual technology or social media, as you say. But we should also focus on the negativity, as you say, ma'am. There is some negativity points, some spiritual leaders on terrorism activity misguide our youth, and they can also profit in use technology easily. So I think government officials and state actors should also focus on technology and virtual world to stop this kind of misguiding activity.
Thank you so much, Hasibul.
So that's all I
Thank you so much. So Maya, do you have any question from the audience? And after that, we'll have the last question, maybe. I think because we have 10 minutes left.
Thank you very much. I will just first allow Mr. Muralidharan to ask any questions, one question perhaps from the youth. Thank you very much.
Thank you. That you feel the present schooling system in your country, whether the teachers really properly guiding the kids to address the contemporary social issues in the society. What do you think about that during your school experience and the out of school? Now we are looking into your own school system. Then how the teacher's role play in this regard?
Mujta, you can answer this question.
Okay. First of all, our education systems, Afghanistan education system, have many problems. Ignoring that we don't have enough schools or we don't have enough teachers to teach our subjects. But behind of these issues, we have some problems for the subjects that include in the books. Most of the books, especially the social books, they show the women as a second sex in the books. And always we can see some gender discriminations with these books. But fortunately, nowadays, some books has changed and government have more attention to these problems faced with them. We have some teachers that during my faculty educations that we studying my bachelor degrees. One of my teachers, he never give a chance to a woman give present in the class. Just the man present their project, and the women never allow. And this is very a shame for teachers. So we have this kind of problems, but hopefully, and I hope the government should focus on these problems, and also the international organ. I hope.
Thank you so much, Mujta. Thank you. Maya, do you have any question from the audience, or you would like to combine the questions in one question, as you say? So go ahead.
Thank
Because
you very
yeah,
much.
we don't have okay.
We have a lot of interesting definitions of PV, about the new vocabulary needed and some of the root causes of violence. I think lots of interesting questions that some of the discussions has already highlighted. But I think a lot of the questions also refer to the future of working with a new framework towards PVE and the changes that we would like to see. So I would like to just allow perhaps a few of you to end with this. We have 5 minutes, so with the question of, if you could change one thing in South Asia for a peaceful world, what would it be? Perhaps we can start with, who would like to start? Dr. Gopinath?
There are so many things that one needs to change in South Asia. But first of all, for all of us, we have to be the change that we wish to see in the world, to use that old quote, and to be able to really understand the complexities of our situation, to be able to celebrate diversity, to eschew homogenization, to walk away from the notion that young people are somehow a problem. We have to, from the so-called demographic dividend, they are a peace dividend. And that's what we have to see them as a valuable asset that has the potential to change, transcending borders and boundaries. They are free of the cartographic anxieties that governments have in the South Asian region. And so transcend those borders and boundaries, both of the mind, look at inner disarmament so that the outer disarmament will follow. And say no to violence, no to guns, and so on. But it's a difficult thing to do. We have to somehow, all I wanted to say is that the woods were made for the hunter of dreams, the rivers for the fisher of song. For those who hunt for the gunless game, the trees and the woods and the streams belong. So let's reclaim our ecological beauty through engaging with peace and look at it as one holistic approach, which includes some of the sustainable development goals, which are only scratching the surface. There are many other things. It's a work in progress. So sustainability, peace, eschewing violence, and let's reclaim that heritage and work together for co-create a world that works for all, not just for some sections. Thank you.
Thank you. That was beautifully put. Thank you very much. Hasibul, would you like to give some thoughts on this? And perhaps if you had any thoughts on the question posed earlier as well. Thank you.
As ma'am says, we should reach the more people and marginalized communities and everyone. Like we all know, there nobody left behind us. So I think we should use some indigenous technique to make our nations, make our region more peaceful and more sustainable, more resilient, more inclusive. But I would like also to say about the Mr. Muralithon activities that he's from education sector. Most of the education policy and education activity in our region are on indoor activity. So we should also arrange some outdoor activity for our students, for our children. And in those outdoor activities, they grow their responsibility. They know about their more practical life. They grow their compassion, affection, each other. So I think we also express the outdoor activity with our teachers, with our parents, and with our little children and students. So education sector also should focus on some outdoor activities on our schools, college, and universities to grow our nation, grow our more peace, grow our regions as a peaceful, more peaceful, and more resilient.
Thank you so much, Hasibul. It's a great point. Sadia, over to you for 1 minute.
Yes, in order to end the religious, social, and all type of extremism, we need to increase the advocacy for the peace, harmony, and promoting the cultural diversity. As we are living in a Asian country, and we are very, very much close to our culture and to our rich culture. So we need peace advocacy at all levels, in our schools, in other institutions, in our public places, and all the places. We need to promote the messages of peace, harmony, and cultural diversity. And for this, we can organize the cultural activities, cultural sports, and arts-related activities. We can also paint our public walls with the messages of peace, harmony, and cultural diversity. And we can, and we need also to reclaim the public spaces, because in the past centuries, we can see when the public places are actively used for the sports activities and for gathering of all the people at one place, and they are the festivals celebrated all together. At that time, there is more peace and harmony, and the people are more connected with each other. They are more human, and they are less violent and extremist. So we need to revive the public spaces, our public walls, and we can give the messages of the peace, harmony at each and every place. And I guess we need to play our role as a youth organization. We need to increase the peace advocacy in the written form or in the festivals or anything we can do.
Thank you so much, Satya. Maya, I think that we can ask one more question from our senior experts, right?
Yes, for sure.
Okay, so
we have Sahad Sani, who has asked a question in the audience.
you can ask.
So I think,
yeah, go ahead and ask that question.
Yeah, thank you. So this is kind of future studies and research. How can we do more research and work understanding violent extremism as a social construct? Should we understand this through neuroscience? And, what are the different kind of research that we need to make sure that we understand this before it goes into textbooks and education systems? So that's a question perhaps to Dr. Gopinath, but also to Mr. Muralitharan about the research that we need to do to make sure that we have evidence-based interventions in the education system as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Maja. That's a very, very interesting question. Of course, research is important, but also the lenses that we use to conduct the research is also important. In other words, what particular lens are we using when we put together this data? How do we analyze this data? Whose perspective are we looking at? And what is the objective of this? If it is to reduce what we call violent extremism, and there are several questions here from Zafar Gondal, who's talking about the causes of violent extremism in Africa, I think. And he's talking about the fact that there is injustice, there is corruption, not so much religious divides. So the point is that contexts are very important. We have to look, there is no one size fits all approach to defining this very complex thing that we call violent extremism. I also want to give you, if you have a minute, let us look at the history of the term radicalization, radical. When I was young, which I hope was not that long ago, to be a radical was considered to be a badge of honor, because it meant that you came from a political persuasion where you were questioning the sort of regressive norms of society. Gradually, and especially after 9/11, the word radical has assumed a very negative connotation. So radicalization today is associated with violent extremism or something that contributes. So there are many programs to de-radicalize the youth. Now, if the youth will not have radically different ideas, how will change come about? Now, what we really need to talk about are disruptions and not radically new ideas. But, we need to understand the etymology of certain terms that have passed into the collective consciousness, the global consciousness. Where are these ideas originating? How are these terms being framed? How are they defining research? And so on. I know I've overtaken my time, but a dispassionate understanding, not just empirically based, but of course, empirically gathered data, but sensitive to context. Each context is different. Now, why is it that the educated young people engaged in the bakery incident in Bangladesh? What drove them? It's obviously not economic marginalization. It was something else that they were looking at. So we need to understand the socio-cultural context, the position, the particular moment in history, the colonial legacies. And I think what we need to really do now is to create a culture of abundance, shifting away from limits to possibilities. Because it's so much more edifying to think of how many apples there will be in a seed than to just count the number of seeds in an apple. So, that's what I would like to submit. I don't know if I'm completely off the mark. But
thank you so much, Dr. Gopinath. I think we don't have too much time. Just we have to switch with the second dialogue. I thank all the speakers for being in this dialogue. Thank you so much for your great information, your great inputs. We really appreciate that one. And also thank you so much to our senior experts. We really enjoyed discussing with you. Thank you so much. So, and we apologize for maybe internet connection, poor connection, because of maybe from our UD speakers or us. And I hand over to Maya. Maya, you can say your last speech, and then we switch to the second dialogue.